Jeremy Fowler. The Niners in the thick of the NFC title game prep. Defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans will interview with the Raiders after Sunday's game against the Rams. That was the working expectations after his interview with the Vikings. Las Vegas not in a major rush.
What's the rush?
Harbaugh's got signing day to worry about. They'll deal with him later, apparently.
You know, I would imagine now it seems like with this tweet, this was in motion before the performance over the weekend. But if I was running a coaching search, I would interview DeMeco Ryans. And I give the Raiders credit on this one. Like, to me, he's a no-brainer to talk to. When I see guys like Jonathan Gannon, the first-year defensive coordinator with the Eagles, who got worked this year. Now, one thing, my buddies in Philly, he's a great guy, good leader, all that. And I think he's very, very impressive. You know, but it'd be like Robert Saleh the first couple years. Like, you like the guy, but his defense is shit. Like, the Eagles' defense was terrible. DeMeco Ryans' defense is literally better than the guy who just was the #1 coaching candidate on the market and could have got like 5 jobs and ended up getting a job. And now his defense is awesome. His resume, I tweeted this out yesterday. When I was in Philly, we traded for DeMeco Ryans, and he was coming off a torn Achilles. One of the things that we kept talking about with DeMeco Ryans, because like, well, is he ever going to get his explosive speed back? It was like his character, his football IQ, and his leadership were like the word on him was like, this guy, man, will help change your building. You want this guy around your other players. He was talked about like you would talk about quarterbacks, right? Peyton Manning or Josh Allen, just like all that stuff. And I also said every executive and every coach that was around him as a player, there is no doubt in my mind. They're like, yeah, not shocked. DeMeco's a sweet coach. Even though he's not, like, he's different than Saleh. He's not loud, kind of rah-rah. And if you notice him, you don't see him going nuts on the sideline, even though it doesn't feel like they show him that.
Camera's never on him. It was on Saleh all the time.
Well, because I do think Robert played to the cameras. I don't think he was trying to. I'm just saying that's just him, right? He was just, he's got kind of, I think McVay's the same way. They can't help themselves. DeMeco, and just because you're not a rah-rah guy doesn't mean, I think this guy's fucking good, man. And the Niners, I don't want to say are going to be lucky to not lose him this year, but I still feel they'll probably keep him this year. Feels like he's a 2-and-done guy.
Yeah, I think he rightfully gets a lot of credit for how good they've been defensively. Everybody knows the story because it's been a story all year long that their secondary has been
safeties haven't been weakness. Terrible. Their corners have been.
Yeah, the cornerbacks. The way they've created pass rush, Chris Kasarik gets a lot of credit for that too. But the way they've created pass rush, I think he gets a lot of credit for. And then again, he's not starting at square one because he is DeMeco Ryans, and he has a fantastic reputation as a leader, as a player, all that stuff. I saw that, they interviewed Jared Mayo as well. Like, I think these would be surprising hires for the Raiders, to your point. But what will not be surprising is DeMeco Ryans becoming a head coach. Wouldn't
you say Mayo would kind of be similar to DeMeco? Former middle linebacker, played for Belichick the whole time, high character guy, clearly good coach. A little more under the radar than DeMeco. I feel like DeMeco you just play longer, right?
Also worked for Bill, which isn't necessarily always a plus. And Bill, DeMeco, we know is in charge of the defense for the 49ers, right?
Yes. And Kyle had an opportunity, right, when Robert left to anoint a lot of people, right? I bet he could have hit the market and hired some people. He chose this guy, which to me doesn't say nothing, right? He believed in this guy, was ready, and he's been proven right. Kyle, in a short time, you would say, has been pretty good with the Niners of identifying assistant coaches.
Yes. Can he keep doing it? I mean, the good ones do.
Well, he's going to lose this guy, right? I mean,
is he going to lose him and Mike McDaniel?
What % chance would you say he's gone this year? Does it feel in your gut?
I think it's low. I think it's probably a year too early. So I would say
20,
yeah, 15%, 20%. You never know. There's a lot of openings. And I think openings that hire GMs, those places might be more inclined to hire coaches who are kind of in Mayo's shoes, in DeMeco's shoes. Like Josh McDaniels has been in this cycle long enough that he has the power to say, I'm not coming unless I'm in charge of players. Right.
Or he's like a package deal with that. Albert Breer wrote, the Ziegler guy that the Raiders interviewed. he was going to be his GM if he went to Cleveland a couple years ago. Like it kind of be like they'd come together. It'd be like that type deal.
Yeah.
Where you're right. I think, maybe a younger GM. Look at last year, right? When the dude that hired Dan Campbell, the guy, and Arthur Smith, both kind of younger guys that kind of come in together. You don't try to hire like, Ron Rivera 2.0. Like that's just guys going to want a little more juice, right? Those guys that want a, second opportunity that have something. Then it actually doesn't really feel like there's a Ron Rivera in this class, does it? Dan Quinn a little bit, but even I wouldn't put him.
Do you have to be a defensive guy to be in Ron Rivera's class? Is that what you?
I just meant like a CEO, kind of the older, gruffer,
Yeah, I mean Zimmer's a defensive coordinator, right?
I think he's unhireable, doesn't it?
As a head coach.
As a head coach, yeah.
I think that'd be one thing for DeMeco to differentiate is like, I am a defensive play caller. I am a defense, like 1 year's not enough time probably for defensive guys to become gurus. But that's one thing with Robert Saleh is he's the CEO type, and that's not really, are you hiring DeMeco Ryans to be the CEO type? Like, I want you to call defense. I've been given the stat every week. Somebody just mentioned in the chat, 16 of 19 quarterbacks have now been held under their passing yard average when they play the 49ers. And when I watch like the Bills-Chiefs game, the Chiefs are demoralizing the number one defense in the NFL and Sean McDermott. So even if you're really good at defense, if you happen to run into one of these guys, you're still at a disadvantage. But I want to know you're at least really good at defense, so I've got a shot. Because if I'm not hiring an elite offensive coach, which, I mean, we'll see how history remembers Zach Taylor, but at this rate, he's not getting fired anytime soon in Cincinnati. All that's left is offensive coaches, right? So you got to be, I think if I'm hiring a defensive coach, I got to be really, really sure that you're the man. Now, here's the thing. Could I hire DeMeco and kind of like the Jets? No, he's bringing Mike McDaniel with him. And so we're going to have a good, solid core here for at least a year. I'm going to get Mike McDaniel as the offensive coordinator. I'm going to get DeMeco, kind of running the program and as the defensive coordinator. Maybe he can sell that. Whereas if you wait a year, does Mike McDaniel become somebody else's OC and you're not getting DeMeco and Mike McDaniel? Like in some ways it would make sense for DeMeco to try and get that job now before Mike McDaniel leaves to go be somebody else's coordinator.
One thing DeMeco will have, he played in Houston under Kyle, so he knows all the Shanahan guys. He then was traded to Andy Reid's team with Doug Peterson, Matt Nagy, and some of those guys. So who knows? Like, I mean, he could have connections of like, damn, this guy can bring other people with experience. That's where the playing career separates to me and why age is so irrelevant. Like, you can't act like he's just been coaching now 5 years. Or same with Mayo. No, they played as the starting middle linebackers, and you would say that's kind of like a coach on the field, right? What they're asked to do in the game plan, especially you're the team captain. Like, that's not nothing.
Yeah, Vrabel.
Like, Bubba Ventrone is a good example, actually, as a special teams coordinator. It was clear he was just, I just watched him really closely 1 year when he was with the Niners, or maybe it was the 2 years. He was also with New England. Like, he was like the special teams captain of the Patriots and the Harbaugh teams. Shocking, he became a special teams coordinator in like 2 years, right? He doesn't need to like work his way up, quality control, pick up guys at the airport. Like, no, it's like, no, this guy's been part of leading meetings. Because wouldn't you say most coaches worth their salt? Like, their players play a role in meetings as well. Like, you don't want to be the only voice. Your team captains talk a lot. And I wonder, the more I'm talking it out, like, what if DeMeco just interviews really well? I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility to be one and done, because you get a lot of credit. This young, he's smart, he's a player, was with Kyle. Like, it'd be a pretty easy sell.
Would you not hesitate at all to make him CEO and not defensive play caller?
Yeah, you have to call. Same if like Brian Daboll. Let's say I'm John Mora and I just hired Joe Shane. He's like, Brian Daboll's my guy. We'll just do a formality, interview him. If Brian Daboll was like, I'm going to hire someone to call offensive plays, I'd be like, whoa, man. I'm hiring Brian Daboll to be the offensive coordinator. I want you to be the bald version of those two guys in the NFC Championship game. I'm watching your teams call plays. Because I don't get with the Jets. Like, Robert, your defenses were good. I want you to call defenses and also be a head coach, like the guy you just worked for. I can't comprehend, these coaches that that don't call plays, that's really what they made up, that are young, that are, you're 43 years old. Like, this is out, you're in your prime. Let's call some plays if you want to graduate out of it. But I'm with you with DeMeco. Like, to me, part of the conversation with DeMeco is, if I'm Mark Davis, is you're going to be my defensive coordinator and the head coach. Say what you want about Gruden. Their offense wasn't terrible, right? I mean, it was an advantage for John. Like, you could say his like leading the team was a little questionable.
Look, I would love for them to get Harbaugh. I think that'd be fascinating. I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world. I wonder if Mark does some of these interviews, and because I think Mark and Harbaugh talk directly, and just goes, "Oh, this is just kind of a calm, normal." I would bring Jim is a proven winner, but there is another life you can lead if you hire a guy like DeMeco Ryans, which is just a solid NFL building, and maybe it could be great. I don't know, but he's just gonna, give you straight answers when you ask him straight questions.
I had the thought
that might be nice for Mark.
I think I had the thought Sunday morning. Are there people already in the Alabama offices that go, if Saban ever leaves, like, let's keep an eye on this guy,
DeMeco?
Like, we'll offer him $12 million. Like, if he just keeps having a great career.
Yeah, it's hard though. I mean, if he has a great NFL career, you don't leave that to go be a college coach.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, but I mean, Nick did once upon a time. Like, you could just be on a 500 team. I offer you $13 million a year. Come home, baby.
But it was going poorly for Nick.
Yeah, I mean, he was 500.
But it was not going well.
Nick.
I
mean, if you're going to the playoffs every year, you won't leave. But the likelihood that he's just going to be a playoff coach would be under 50%, right? He might just be in a solid team that's winning 7-8 games, competing.
Yeah.
Alabama will pay more than the NFL.
Yeah.
Right? If things are going poorly. I just had that thought. Like, if I was in their building, I'd be like, on our short list of replace, let's throw his name down on there.
Let's at least talk to him.
He didn't play for Nick, but I think he's actually I think he's from Alabama too.
He could have.
He's from Alabama.
Feels like a Nick type.
He rose, man. Fast. Quick. But again, he's been, I think he'd tell you, I've been in the NFL for 15 years.
Well,
I got here in 06.
Yeah. I also think, to go back to like the Lock and Four article about Shanahan, it's easy to look at Kyle, especially when he promotes from within, look at some of his coaches and wonder if he just hires people he likes. But the people he likes can help. The people he likes turn out to be pretty good. The LaFleurs, McDaniel, McVay, Saleh. So far, the people he likes are good coaches.
Seems like Welker's doing a pretty good job with
Welker. I mean, the way so the Shanahan stamp of approval, I would say at this point, worth something. And we felt, you and I talked about this when he promoted DeMeco. Like, it's pretty impressive just to be promoted from within. I think maybe there was a time when if Vic Fangio wasn't the head coach of the Broncos, maybe he would have been Kyle's defensive coordinator. But you would say Kyle now twice has hired defensive coordinators that were not on at least like regular just regular people's radar as defensive coordinators. And twice he's nailed it. Nailed it.
Here's what I will say also about DeMeco. I think I said on the podcast on Saturday night on our live stream and podcast that my guess was he had made $50 million. Someone shot me a DM. They're like, well, once you said that, I looked it up. It was $96 million is what DeMeco made in his career. $96 million.
Wow.
And he played in Houston for a long time, so no state income tax. So he made some cash. Looking at his bio, Mayo, when Belichick hired him, he just made Mayo the inside linebacker coach. Like, he just went right to a position. And when you go to a position in the NFL, you immediately make like, $500,000 minimum, right? That's what the going rate is, positions. DeMeco started as a defensive quality control coach. Like, I don't know how many guys with $96 million at 34 years old would just be like, yeah, I'll break down film for the guys.
What do those guys make? 50,000, 60,000?
No, I mean, I think it's probably
70?
No, it's probably
180.
Yeah, it's one.
Oh, you think it's less?
120, 140, something like that. I mean, that's what I think. In like Philly, might have to pay you 110. San Francisco probably pay you 140, right? Depending on where you live. But it's a 6-figure job. But it's a 6-figure job like you get at Google. It's the shittiest job in the building.
The other quality control guy's like, hey man, we're looking for a roommate. DeMeco, you interested? He's like, nah.
I'm good. I'm actually joining the country club with Robert Los Gatos.
Do you guys need a room? I got 8. Yeah, that's very interesting.
That's not nothing that he started like that. I mean, he's an impressive guy. $96 million. Would you go be like a radio producer? You know, to like I just want to get in.
Oh, well, no.
I'm just trying to use a parallel. I mean, it's just it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I guess Welker kind of did it. I mean, I do think Welker started as a position, but is he? I mean, I know we've talked about him too. I
don't know. I mean, you have to think that there's a good chance that he is a good offensive, that he's an offensive coordinator candidate. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, let's say this: McDaniels leaves. McDaniel. Yeah, I would imagine that Wes would be in position to potentially take that role.
I think we're getting in a short amount of time. So far, it's probably too soon to call it a pattern. Time will tell, but it's very Belichickian, right? It's Saban-esque. You promote from within. These people know what your system is. You speak the same language. You use people's time as a lower level assistant to train them in what you want, and then they're ready to roll when they get to you. So we'll see, but I think it'd be very interesting. What would Kyle do next? But you'd have to think it would be, from within.
With OC or DC?
Both.
He hired, I noticed him at practice. I think he's technically the linebacker coach now with DeMeco being the DC, is James Belcher, who was on Arian's staff, and I think once Todd Bowles got hired, took over for him. So I give you credit when you do a move like that. When you get a guy who's coordinated, who's been at a high-level staff, it might just be out of work, and you bring him on. And I think last year maybe he was a defensive assistant, and then once the Saleh thing happened, you just have a guy to replenish. And then you're able to teach him over the years, kind of your guy, right? And that's just ideally you just like Harbaugh staff. They never lost anybody, so you just have the same guys. That's not the case. Like he has to, that's the one thing with Kyle. You're going to have to do moves like this. And the more you have success, aren't guys like that going to want a part of you? Like, can you go to the New York Giants staff, everyone that just got fired, the Chicago Bears, and just take their best assistant and be like, come with me. You're a job away from being immediately put in a spot or becoming a coordinator with me. Like, you can kind of do stuff like that. And I think it's very difficult to do what Bill does because Bill, you would say, doesn't really do that. Every once in a while, like Bielema, right? But for the most part, it's like he breeds you from a young age, and then you just work your way up. Kyle's done that, but he's just literally lost them all, potentially, within a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, promoting guys is dangerous, especially if you're gonna win, because they're gonna get jobs. It's one thing for guys to get jobs after 3 years. To get after 1 or 2 years, I think it makes you more likely to promote from within.
Wouldn't you imagine that if you're like a young offensive guy in football, you're just like a 25-year-old quarterback assistant, let's just say at like a Division I program. You're like, your dream is, because I remember being at Fresno State, I was like, I want to work in the NFL. I want to work in the NFL. Wouldn't you do everything humanly possible to get just somehow in front of McVay or Kyle and be like, get me in the ground floor. I want to learn everything from you. I'll do you pay me $20,000. Kyle, you might have to pay me a little more because I would live in a tent, but same with you, McVay. You'd have to, I don't know what the going rate is for the lowest. It's hard out here. But just let me in. I'll be the lowest guy on the totem pole. Andy Reid had people begging him for years. And look how it turned out for them all. All of them became millionaires. Every fucking single one became millionaires.
I say the same thing about if I'm a player's agent in the draft. I want to be on your team. I want my guy on your roster. And I will tell you the other teams that like my guy to help you make sure that you get me.
Do you think Mahomes' agent's glad they did that to Andy?
Yes.